right, late last night, Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa suffered another concussion in that loss to the Bills 31-10. The injury happening in the third quarter when he's scrambling for a first down, colliding with the Bills' Damar Hamlin. Tua came out of the game immediately, and it was pretty quickly diagnosed as a concussion. Of course, Tua Tagovailoa has a history of head injuries. Last season, he played all 17 games, but back in 2022, he did suffer a couple of concussions there in Week 4, then again in Week 16. So Tua, who has had a number of concussions, the future outlook right now is up in the air at the moment, but head coach Mike McDaniel speaking to the media moments ago in South Florida with an update on where the Dolphins go from here after Tua left that game last night.
So that started late last night, and I think the way to the best articulate where we're at is, the team and the organization are very confident in Skylar, and there was a reason he was our backup quarterback. That being said, we will bring in someone. We're just evaluating the pros and cons for the different situations and getting through all those possibilities to do the best thing for the team. But as it stands today, I'm expecting that Skylar is the next man up.
Thank you.
Adam Beasley.
Hey, Mike, you didn't have obviously a ton of information at the time. And again, I'm sure there's a ton of imaging you go through now. Was it in the moment, did it seem as bad as maybe some of his past concussions, or is there a reason for optimism that this might not be as bad as some of the ones in the past?
Well, realistically, like for me, first and foremost, like I'm not assessing the injury through the lens of like, all right, so what does this mean for him playing? And so what I know and to be of the utmost importance and what I really care about, it didn't really matter the severity of it. I think this is something that it's super important to like all the science behind concussions tells you what we've learned is how delicate the time is right after an injury, and how important it is that you don't institute extra sources of anxiety. So from my vantage point, I feel it's supremely important that in understanding that I'm not giving off any sort of vibes. I'm not trying to even look at, okay, well, how serious is this relative to, his past ones? That's really for me, I know the facts are that it's important that he gets healthy day by day. And in that, the best thing I can do is not try to assess what this even means from a football standpoint. And knowing that, and with my relationship with players, specifically with Tua, but with all the players, like it's not in my DNA to think like, hey, what does this mean for anything? What it means is that to properly prioritize what's most important, that I have to put his health as the primary. And so It's been 10 hours since I last talked to you guys. It's not in the for me, I absolutely positively will not do anything to make anything worse or hurt, or any one of our players, specifically, guys that are in, concussion protocols. So ironically, I think there's a lot of people that have vested interest in the Miami Dolphins, and there's a lot of fans and there's a lot of people that want to support, but quite literally questioning timelines, that gives forth anxiety. Trying to meet them, trying to assess what this means for playing. I mean, this is heavy stuff that you have to be diligent and deliberate in, coaching up to hey, your job is to be a dad and to communicate daily, and we'll have daily assessments with experts in the field and handle that. And that is the only thing that matters, because you don't make matters worse by, trying to. He would be able to feel if I was trying to vibe out and diminishing, what this was based upon some symptoms, So I like literally I understand it completely, and it's not like, it's not like I would have thought any other way until I was in a position of, finding out information of what's best for players in this situation. But talking about or having any sort of assumptions or planning, like I have no idea, and nor should I, and I don't want to, because I want him to be healthy. And the best way to get the best way to be as healthy as fast as possible is to not focus on anything but being present for him with Ace and Maisie and Anna, and that's it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that I know there's a long line of people.
All right, we were just listening to Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel give an update on his quarterback Tua Tagovailoa after he suffered another concussion. Right now, you're looking at a list of the injury history here for the Dolphins quarterback. It is lengthy. We don't know, obviously, how many games will be missed. Mike McDaniel, typically with injuries, doesn't like to get into timelines anyway. Today, he definitely was not getting into that in terms of what's next for Tua. Clearly, the priority is the person first, the player second. Let's bring in our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Now, Jonathan, we're just listening to head coach Mike McDaniel talk about Tua, so let's keep it right there. What is next for Tua? What happens here going forward today and then down the road?
So he's in the concussion protocol, and unfortunately for Tua, unfortunately for the Miami Dolphins, it is all too familiar. And so it is understood what is about to take place. If there are symptoms that are present, including headaches and issues with light, that those symptoms have to dissipate before he can then begin some aerobic exercise. And then there's still another step before he can even touch a football out on the practice field. The concern here, Mike, and let us assume that there will be a return to play for Tua Tagovailoa this season. The concern is that now that this is the third known concussion in 24 months, that with the first one, there were about 2 games missed. The second one, there were 3 games missed, and that was at the end of the season. Remember, that was the playoff loss that they had, and so we don't know if the recovery could have been even longer than that. That was just the end of the season. And then now we have a third concussion, and what studies have shown is that that the return to baseline, if you will, with 3 or more concussions, that recovery time gets longer. So that's what studies show. That's what medicine has shown more times than not. we don't know how long, again, assuming a return to play for Tua, how long he would miss. But again, the sort of past, when you talk about multiple concussions, when you get to those 3 or more, which is where we are at today with Tua in just 2 years, it would indicate that he would miss 2, 3, potentially more games before he's able to return to play.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is a common press conference for Mike McDaniel in his short time here with the Dolphins in terms of the health of his quarterback. When you were listening to Mike there, what stood out to you the most?
Well, he obviously is an empath, right? I mean, he feels, and he feels for his players. And I remember what really stood out to me last night in listening to his post-game press conference was Mike McDaniel didn't call Tua a player of his. He called him his teammate, right? And so that really stood out. You don't hear coaches say that very often. We all saw the video, the image of him kissing the head of Tua after he was able to walk off on his own power after sustaining that concussion. And so obviously that stands out. But there is a seriousness, Mike, to this that obviously there's a gravity to it, a tone, a cloud all over this. And, you know, I was a beat reporter 7 years ago covering the Carolina Panthers when very eerily similar Luke Kuechly suffered his 3rd concussion in about 26 or so months. And so, you know, I've been in those press conference rooms. I've been around those teams where everyone starts to ask the questions. Should this player keep playing? And in the first day or 2 after that, there are so many unknowns. And I do fully understand the questions that are all around Tua, all around the Miami Dolphins right now, related to not only his health today, not only his short-term health, but his long-term health. But certainly those are questions that Tua is going to have to answer in consultation with his family and doctors. Those are questions he's going to have to answer for himself when the time comes.
And sticking with that theme of family, you heard Mike McDaniel in the press conference even mention to his kids there and how important this is for him to be a dad at this point. In terms of the Dolphins, though, Skylar Thompson, it looks like he is going to get the keys to his car, at least for the short term, and they are going to go look out at quarterbacks. Are there any names out there that may be jumping out to you? Are you hearing anything? I know it's been just 10 hours, as McDaniel mentioned, since this happened, but any names popping up?
So the fact that they're rolling with Skylar Thompson on what is a little bit of a longer week, right? They played on Thursday, and so saying that they're going to go with Skylar, or at least move forward with him right now, would indicate that they are not looking to bring in that big veteran name right now. The name that everyone's going to talk about is Ryan Tannehill. I understand that, of course, the former Miami Dolphins quarterback. Of course, he was there, but this is a completely different system, completely different scheme than what he played in when he was there before the Tennessee Titans. It has been my understanding, dating back to the preseason, that Ryan Tannehill is not particularly interested in being a quick fix for a team. You know, popping in there, learning a new system and scheme, and thanks for your duties for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Now the starter has returned. If he does come back and play, it's been my understanding that it would be for a prolonged period of time. There are other quarterbacks who are out there who, for the right price, could be gotten. I don't think there's any question about that. You look at the Dallas Cowboys, for example, Trey Lance, who's there as the number 3 quarterback. Now that Dak Prescott has locked in to his contract, there's no more threat of will he or won't he stay. So maybe certainly Trey Lance becomes more available than he was 7 days ago. But the Miami Dolphins have to. Right now, there is no rush for them to execute a trade for someone, to give away draft capital when it does not appear that they know how long Tua Tagovailoa is going to be out. Of course, Mike McDaniel is saying that timelines give anxiety. There is truly, as much as I am a journalist and reporter and want to know the timeline, there is no value in the Miami Dolphins organization to put out any timeline right now if they have one. And because this happened, 10 hours ago, it's hard for me to believe that there is any sort of legitimate timeline for this because of symptoms, because you have to, get through the first day or two before you can ever really figure that out. along with everything else involved with Tua suffering yet another concussion. So getting another arm in there, I don't think there's any question or doubt about that. Someone who has been out on the street, maybe a quarterback that some fans have heard of. I can see that happening, but in terms of a name, a real legitimate bona fide name, I don't know that the Dolphins are there quite yet to bring in.
Jonathan Jones, our lead NFL insider, with the latest on Tua Tagovailoa and his concussion they suffered last night. JJ, thank you so much for your insight here on what we saw last night.